meeting in 2022. Thank you also for wearing your masks. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadandi people of the Noongar Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just to advise that we are digitally recorded in accordance with Council Policy EMCP2, which has been recently amended in December, and we will put the recordings on the website when the minutes have been completed. Also a reminder that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed without the permission of the chairperson. Just moving along through our agenda today, we have apologies. We do have one apology today.
Thank you, Mrs. President. We have an apology from Councillor Mills.
Do we have any approved leave of absence today?
Thank you, Mrs. President. No, there are no none lodged.
Do any councillors have any need to apply for any leave of absence for the next meetings? No, moving on. Item 3, announcements from presiding member. I've put a list in the actual agenda today. It is a little bit lean on as I was away for January and we haven't had a meeting since December. I believe we have also an announcement by Councillor Jones today.
Yes.
Yeah.
On is now.
Thank you for bearing with us for that minor technical hitch. Thank you. You can go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Sorry, Madam President. Firstly, may I congratulate you on the presentation at the recent Australia Day Awards and Citizenship Ceremony in Donnybrook and also at Kirrup. Your presentation was of the highest order, and I thank you and Bronwyn and her team for organising the day. It was a well-run day. The Citizenships Awards were made a bit more difficult by the pronunciation of some of our new Australians, but you handled that with great aplomb, so congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, it was a lovely day. I'm just moving on to item 4, declarations of interest. I believe we have a couple here.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Yes, I have 2 declarations of interest, both from Councillor Smith, and they're both a financial interest. Councillor Smith declares a financial interest in item 9.1.2, the proposed Argyle Irish Town Bushfire Brigade Station, as he is working on a Western Power Corporation application for that project. And Councillor Smith's other declaration is in relation to item 9.3.1, the Donnybrook Dental Surgery partial surrender of lease, as he may possibly attain some work through that refurbishment process. So thank you, Councillor Smith, for lodging both of those interests. Just as a reminder to those more so in the gallery, as Councillor Smith has declared a financial interest in those items, he'll need to leave the room while those items are considered, and he can't take part in the debate or the vote on that.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, public question time. 5.1, responses to previous public questions taken on notice. I believe Simon McGuinness has a number of questions here that will be answered.
Thank you, Mrs. President. We did have 9 questions from Mr. McGuinness. The responses will be provided in the minutes, and I will make sure a letter or an email is provided to you, Mr. McGuinness, with the response to those questions. I have got the responses drafted on the screen. I understand they're not available in the actual version that has been printed, but they will form part of the minutes, and I will make sure that correspondence is given to you, Mr. McGuinness, on those questions and answers. Thank you, Mrs. President. We also had some questions from Mr. Shane Sercombe, lodged on email earlier this week. Again, those questions and answers will form part of the minutes, and I'll email the responses to Mr. Sercombe in relation to those questions. So they're the questions on notice.
Thank you very much. We can move along to 5.2, public question time. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, Mr. Peace. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam President. Is this working?
Yes.
Brian Peace, Argyle, 145 Marshall Road, Argyle. And for those who don't know, the locality of Argyle provides for 7% of the rate income of this wonderful shire. So I just thought I'd get that in before I ask my question. So you suggested during the last elections that Argyle wasn't necessarily part of the Donnybrook. Argyle wasn't part of the Donnybrook Shire, so I thought I'd get that one onto the record with that stuff. My questions, I have 2 questions. I probably could have a couple more, but I'll do those for another day. My first question relates to some of the most disgraceful journalism that I have seen since I've been involved with this.
Thank you for your question. I was aware of the 2 articles. one in the South West Times and the Countryman. I did read the Countryman, but I didn't read the other one. Mr. Fowler has, as far as I'm aware, has not been approached to correct the information. So I could probably pass it on to the CEO if he's been approached at all by Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Mrs. President. No, I've not been approached. Thank you, Mrs. President. Thank you, Mr. Peace. It's probably something I'll need to have a conversation with the council about to determine whether we want to go down that route or whether, as the saying goes, let sleeping dogs lie. I don't have a definitive answer for you on that. I know that there is a lot of misinformation. I know there's a lot of inaccuracies and potentially misleading information in that article. As to whether the council or the Shire wants to address that or not is something I'll need to take under advisement with the actual council.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Mr. Peace. Look, it's something that the council will be discussing in due course. They'll be looking at various aspects of that, whether it's to do with scope or various different scenarios. We'll be looking at different options. So until we sort of meet and have that discussion, I cannot answer that question unless the CEO has further response to that.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Yeah, I can put a little bit more meat on the bones on that. We are having regular cost estimate updates from a company called Altus, which are a certified cost estimating organisation. Just to put a little bit of perspective on it, what was going to cost the scope we were going to deliver probably about, say, 6 to 8 months ago at $9 million. To deliver that today is about $12.8 million.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the gallery? Yes, Mr. McGuinness. Please come down and mention your name and where you're from. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGuinness, for the question. I'll put you through to the Director of Corporate and Community who will answer the question for you.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr McGuinness, for your question. No, depreciation as such is a non-cash item. On page 2 of the monthly financial statement, you will find a statement of material variances where there is an explanation as to why depreciation hasn't been updated within the database at this stage. So will it affect our surplus position? No, not at all.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll put you over to the Director of Corporate Community if he's able to answer that at the moment or whether it needs to go on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr McGuinness. Mr McGuinness, I would have to take that question on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGuinness. I'll put you over to the CEO to answer that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Thank you, Mr McGuinness, for the question. The proposition put to the state government through the COVID recovery plan was on a co-contribution basis that the Shire would put in $3 million on the basis that it leveraged double that out of the state. We haven't signed or executed a financial assistance agreement for the full $6 million yet. So the co-contribution the legal requirement for the co-contribution will be enacted once we've signed a financial assistance agreement with the state government. We've accessed $250,000 of the $6 million already, and that's been provided to us on the basis of not having to provide a co-contribution of the equivalent of the 250 to the 3 million. So I hope that provides a little bit of certainty. I've got some more correspondence from the new Minister for Sport and Recreation, which I'll make available at the next council meeting, which will provide a little bit more certainty to you in relation to that co-contribution requirement.
There's an awful lot of...
That's the question, is it? Is how we're going to clear that?
You know, basically it's worth being the whole world. You know, it's how we're going to clear up all the disinformation surrounding.
Shall I put that onto the CEO of how we...
Thank you, Mrs. President. I'm not sure it's the role entirely of the council to clear up all of that misinformation. My opinion, and it's an opinion only, there are organisations and people out there creating misinformation. I suppose my role, and I think the council's role, is to make sure we make good decisions. We can explain those decisions to the council, to the community. We can involve the community through that decision-making process. Ultimately, it's the council's role to make those decisions. If there is... Sorry, I missed that. Correct. That's correct. Yep. And the council, I think, and the Shire has done a good job of providing a lot of information to the community on the project and on the process. So I'm not sure that there's a lot more that we can do. If there are organisations or individuals that want to frustrate the process, that's their right to do that.
And is there
If,
financial plan?
I'll pass it on to the CEO.
Thank you.
There is.
I'm logging a call with the consultant who's prepared the business plan for the project. I haven't yet received it. The process has been slowed down somewhat because some of the stakeholders were unavailable early on to provide feedback to that consultant. But as I had a meeting with the Shire President earlier today, I'm looking to present that business plan to the council at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mr McGuinness. Are there any other questions from the floor? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Moving on, do we have any petitions, presentations or deputations today?
Mrs. President, no, we do not.
Thank you. I think you go to this, don't we? Okay, we're moving on to the en bloc items. Do I have a mover for those items en bloc? Now, the items en bloc are 7.1, 7.2, 9.1.1, 9.2.2, 9.2.3, 9.2.5, 9.2.6, 9.3.2 and 9.3.3. Did I go too quick, or would you like the titles read out? Oh, thank you. Councillor Massey has moved. Seconded it is Councillor Jones. Is there anyone against moving that motion en bloc? No? Vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Carried. Okay, moving on to our first item that wasn't passed en bloc is 9.1.2, proposed Argyle Irish Town Bushfire Brigade Station, Reserve 12518, corner of Southwest Highway and Argyle Road, Argyle. And yes, Councillor Smith is leaving the room because he has a financial interest. Now, can I have a mover for this item, please? Someone to move this motion? Councillor Goobler, seconded. Councillor Newman. Does anyone wish... Oh, actually, Councillor Goober, you moved it. Would you like to say... as a speaker of the mover?
Yeah, I think this project's going to go ahead. It's been on the drawing board for a while, so they've selected the site now. We've looked at the details at last agenda briefing meeting, so I don't think there's any reason to hold it up any further. So,
thank you, Councillor Goober. Councillor Newman, would you like to speak as a seconder?
I actually only had a question which only came to me during today, was in relation to that site and the location of the building. I noticed the clearing that was anticipated to need to be undertaken to facilitate that. Does that include a provision for a bushfire attack level assessment and a setback to keep the building out of the bushfire, out of the fire zone? It just seemed to be a very small clearing area, that was all.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. I'll pass that on to the Director of Operations to answer that question.
So through the Madam President, thank you for the question, Councillor Newman. So as part of the approvals process, it will require a bushfire attack level assessment, and the building will need to be certified. Depending on the outcome of that assessment, that will determine the building materials and so on needs to comply with the Australian standards and so on. So part of the assessment and the amount of clearing required will include having that separation between the building and the vegetation to comply with the relevant legislation.
Supplementary to that, I just then wondered, does the community understand that the area that might be cleared may actually be larger than what is currently depicted on the plan? That was my concern in that was perhaps the clearing could actually be more extensive than is currently depicted. That was all.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Newman.
At this stage, the assessment hasn't been undertaken in that regard. I mean, because of the fact that it's not a habitable building, those separation zones or separation distances are perhaps less than if it was a residential dwelling, those types of things. So, the AS 3959, which is the building standards, means it needs to be built out of certain materials. It can have a lower setback, so it will form part of that assessment. Once we go through that process, we'll know for sure, but it's our expectation that that roughly 5,000 square metres should be sufficient.
Thank you very much. Just in speaking for the motion, yes, I believe it's a very good project and it's very well located and where it's situated, and I'd encourage my fellow councillors to vote for it to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. I'll take that as you're speaking as a seconder. Is there anyone against this motion? No. The mover has a right to reply. Councillor Goobler, would you like to have a reply to that motion?
Yeah, just in response, I think when the council members here need to support this project and move forward with it, so that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Councillor Goobler. I'll take the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Smith has been asked to come back into the room. Okay, now Councillor Smith has returned. I move on to 9.2.4, Budget Review 2021-22. Recommendation that Council adopts the Budget Review 2021-22 as provided at attachment 9.2.4, subsection 1, resulting in a balanced budget position. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Glover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Atherton. Councillor Glover, would you like to speak for the speak to the motion?
The budget review was very helpful, and I've had a lot of talking around that as well, so it's been very helpful. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to raise with regard to that. Is that my time to do that now?
No, can we just speak to the motion and then I'll get the seconder, and then after that we can ask questions. Thank you. Thank you. The seconder is Councillor Atherton. Would you like to speak to the motion? Thank you. Councillor Glover, you may ask your question.
Okay, so my question is around the titling or the naming of one of the particular lines. It's on page 22. It's COA 1264, I think. And that was just with regard to, and then it says B320. So my question is in regard to the description of that item. So it says that it's Egan Park Netball Club Rooms, and so my question is, are we able to change the description of that to what it actually is, because it's not the netball club rooms anymore? And I feel that by describing it as that, it may in the future be something that might impact netball if they are seeking further funding or something further along the line, when people like us aren't here to say, oh no, that was something else.
Thank you for the question. I will pass that on to the CEO if he's able to, or
I might pass that to my right to
the Director of Corporate and Community will be able to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. President and Mr. CEO and Councillor Glover. Yes, absolutely. What I would suggest is that an addendum to the officer recommendation be made, and that would be along the lines of that account number 1264 and job number B320, which currently refer to netball club rooms, have the account descriptors amended to, and I must say I don't know what they should be amended to. So I need help with that, Because I understand that they were the netball club rooms.
They were the Egan Park Sporting Complex club rooms because it was a combination of hockey and netball. Netball were just more visible because they were there on a Saturday morning, whereas hockey were there during the week and also on the weekends when we had hockey in Donnybrook.
Through the President, if I may.
Yes, yes.
Would it be, can I suggest, given that the club rooms are obviously still located at Egan Park and we have activities at Egan Park, that the accounts be renamed to either Egan Park Club Rooms or Egan Park Building, and I'm looking toward the CEO for some guidance here on this one as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mrs. President, yeah. If Councillor Glover's got that name of the specific name, you might be able to help us out. Could you just repeat what the name of the building used to be called formally? It was the Egan
Park Sporting Complex.
Egan Sporting Complex.
There was a sign on the side of the building that had that where okay. the painting is.
Yeah, I remember a sign being there. Yeah. Yeah. Mrs. President, may I just make a suggestion that the descriptor be changed.
Yes, Councillor Glover.
Make a suggestion, and Mr. Dolzadelli, if I'm on the wrong track here, please let me know. But change the descriptor to the previous Egan Park Sporting Complex building. And we can word up an amendment, a small amendment to that, in order to achieve that.
I think that would be suitable because it doesn't have netball attached to that particular budget line. Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting that. We just let the minute taker just catch up. Yeah, Councillor Glover, does that represent what you're looking at changing to?
That would be great, thank you.
That's an amendment.
So that's an amendment, so we'll actually deal with the amendment first. So we're actually going to deal with the amendment, so do I have a mover and is the movement of the amendment, and need a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Massey? Is there anyone against that amendment? Okay, I'm just putting to the vote the amendment. All those in favour? Carried?
Just give us 1 minute.
Okay. 8. Now that motion becomes the substantive motion, so I'll actually read that out. That council adopts the budget review 2021-22 as provided at attachment 9.2.4.1, resulting in a balanced budget position subject to the description for COA 1264, Job B 320, being changed to the previous Egan Park Sporting Complex. Do we have anyone against that motion? No? Okay. The right of reply goes back to the mover, who's Councillor Glover. Would you like the right of reply for that motion? Yeah, sure.
Light on. Can I just ask a little bit more to do with the pump track as well? So COA 1184, job R156. Now I'm under the impression that the pump track footpath link, which has got an amendment in there for $20,000, is the drought, the DCP funding. Is that correct?
I'll put that over to the Director of Corporate and Community. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, Councillor Glover, that is DCP funding.
Any further questions before you've got the right to reply?
No further questions. I think the budget review is fine, and I agree with the amendment, so I'm hoping my fellow councillors will support it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the vote. All those in favour? 8-0, carried. Now we're moving along to our last item for the night, 9.3.1, Donnybrook Dental Surgery, partial surrender of lease, option for Shire use. Councillor Smith is leaving the room, for he has a financial interest in this item. Do I have a mover of this motion? Councillor Glover, seconded Councillor Jones. Councillor Glover, would you like to speak for this to the motion?
At the agenda briefing, we did ask, I asked, not we, about whether Lotteries West funding would also supplement.
Is this a question or is this
No,
talking to the motion?
Just me talking to. Sorry, it was my question. Yeah, I agree. We do need more office space. I agree with the motion.
Thank you. I'll come back to your question in a moment. Councillor Jones, I believe you seconded. Is that correct? Yes? Would you like to speak to the motion?
Oops. I agree with the motion. I think it's very important that we do have more office space for the council because it's very tight in the current council administration block, so I think it's a very good alternative. My only concern, Madam President, up the track is the number of parking bays.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll go back to the question of Councillor Glover. You had a question?
I did. At the agenda briefing, I did speak about the possibility of looking at Lottery West funding to supplement this $50,000 as well, or to replace that. And I'm wondering if there's been any inquiries or any options around that.
Thank you for your question. I'll pass that on to the CEO to answer that.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Not being at the agenda briefing, sorry, I didn't know that question was asked. I'd need to check in with Mr. Potter and Mr. Dolzadelli as to whether they've made any inroads there. Before I do so, I would be very, very surprised if Lottery West would provide funding for a local government office accommodation. We can ask the question certainly, but I'm 99.9% sure the answer would be no. There is another funding opportunity as a part of the lease conditions. As a part of the lease handback, there are make good provisions. There's part of the make good provisions are to repaint the facility, to recarpet or to resurface, to have it professionally cleaned, and there's a few other bits and pieces. Bupa, who have the lease, are looking to surrender the lease on the 28th of February, which doesn't leave them a lot of time to do those physical works. I've entered into discussions with them for them, in lieu of doing the works, to make a payment to the Shire. We've had an estimate of around about $41,500 to repaint the place, to recarpet it, put new floor surfacing down, redo all the lights, all the special fluoros and bits and pieces. So in terms of revenue, there's an opportunity there to use that revenue. Also, I have negotiated with Bupa that between the surrender date and the ordinary termination of the lease, which would be the 30th of May, they will pay 50% of the rent between that period. That works out to be about $5,000. So there's potentially $45,000 worth of revenue from Bupa towards that facility. Notwithstanding that, we'll still have the conversation with Lottery West.
Thank you very much for the question. Are there any other questions before I call upon anyone against this motion? No, no one's against? All right, I will take a vote. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. We will now call back Councillor Smith after that item. That's it.
Just wait for Councillor Smith.
Thank you for coming back, Councillor Smith. You've come just in time for closure. Look, I just need to advise everyone that the next council meeting will be held on the 23rd of March at 5 p.m. at the Donnybrook Council Chambers here. The briefing session, which is held the week before, will be actually held at the Currup Hall. So the Currup Hall, there will not be any recording at the Currup Hall for the briefing session, but there will be recordings at the council meeting on the 23rd of March held here in Donnybrook. And thank you very much for all coming along. Thank you. At 5:42.